Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Listening to Stephen's remarks about the cell phones, of course, reminded when I see Mark Warner give a speech, who of course made his money in the cell phone industry. Always starts out by saying he's the one person who asks you to turn them on. He likes hearing them. That's a good line for a speaker. I think this is a fascinating issue, and I think it's one that's really going to dominate in the next decades when we look at what U.S. foreign policy is, and that's the issue of global development. And I think overall I was asked in terms of how to speak about this morning to sort of say where all of this was headed. I can't really tell you. I don't know who the next president's going to be, who's going to be in Congress, where it's going to go. What I can tell you is where I would like to see it headed, and assure you that I'm going to work hard to try to make sure that happens. And where I think it's headed is to have a much greater focus on global development, to see foreign aid as one tool in a broad toolbox. Its overall goal is economic sustainability for as much of the planet as possible, as opposed to a Band-Aid, as opposed to trying to fix one small problem all over the place and running around in circles, largely, in many cases, unsuccessfully. To view it in a collective. How can we all work together, all the different entities and pieces that have an interest in global development, particularly in those parts of the world that are underdeveloped, in those parts of the world that have the bulk of those nearly 3 billion people who are still living on less than $2 a day. And this is an exciting time to be looking at this world, as there are a lot of players involved, both NGOs, private industries, government, who are trying to figure out how to improve development. As Stephen mentioned, in my part of the world, we have a lot of the companies. We also have a lot of the NGOs. Of course, the Gates Foundation is there, World Vision, Initiative for Global Development. There are a lot of groups that are in many cases being led by former business people or current business people to look out at the world and say, how can we actually start to reduce poverty and increase development? And they're seeing that economics, that basic economic growth, is the key piece of that. How can we take advantage of these markets? And I think businesses are seeing it as an opportunity to go into those areas and take advantage of a market. It's sort of the Henry Ford model writ large, where Henry Ford said it doesn't make sense to have people making my cars who can't afford to buy them. Multiply that by the hundreds of thousands, and you get what the world looks like today. All those people out there that are a potential market for our goods give us an opportunity for economic growth if we can simply get there. And there are a lot of different building blocks in getting there. Certainly capacity building, which has emerged as a critical issue. I've done a lot of work with Claude Fontaine, I see he's here today, who's working on that issue. How do you go into these developing nations, and once you open up trade opportunities, how do you work with them and their local businesses to take advantage of that? I think that's a critical issue, and that has to be a big piece of what we do. But to start on the U.S. government piece, we have to reorganize the way we do foreign aid. There are a lot of things wrong with it right now. I think the biggest thing wrong with it is you've got several dozen different agencies who are involved in it, and there is no central coordination. There is no central plan. There's a good piece here, a good piece there, a good piece over here that isn't coordinated. And coordination is going to be a major theme of what I talk about this morning. So number one, let's look at what foreign assistance we're doing and try to make it coordinated and work as effectively as possible. And I'm big fan of the Millennium Challenge corporations. I definitely think those will continue. I think we need to expand their ability to do what they do and basically give them greater control. And the model that I have in mind is what Great Britain does with DFID. I can never remember what that stands for, but that is essentially their cabinet level post on foreign assistance. And they did a number of things when they reorganized a few years back that have led them to be thought of as the model for foreign aid for our country. But the two biggest ones that stand out for me is, number one, they consolidated as much of the money as possible into one place, into DFID. They have the responsibility and the control over the bulk of the money that goes out that can be in any way categorized as foreign assistance. And the second thing they did is they decoupled their foreign assistance from all other governmental objectives. And what that means is they looked at the money they give out from a very straightforward standpoint. Is this helping global development? Is this reducing global poverty and increasing opportunity in the developing world? Instead of looking at it primarily from a commercial aspect, is this helping some British business? Or from a foreign policy aspect, is this helping advance some other foreign policy aid? They looked at they looked at it and said, what's the best way to spend the money for that one sole goal? And I think that kind of consolidation would greatly benefit our efforts here in the United States. And then the other piece of it is, once we're doing that, how can we better coordinate it with all the other players? There is so much money and so many entities out there that are involved right now in global development. A lot of times they're crossing over each other. When you look at what has happened in Afghanistan since 2001, you can see some of this. There are a lot of things that have gone wrong in Afghanistan since 2001, and this certainly isn't the only one, but one of them was who was in charge. There was a lot of development coming in. There was a lot of NGOs coming in, a lot of different countries. There was even a few companies who were interested in doing business, but it was all kind of scattershot and in many cases at cross purposes and didn't maximize the resources that were there. We need to work better together on public-private partnerships and see that both things have to happen. You have to have the capacity building, the trade piece, the piece that basically allows business to be business to grow, but you also have to have the basics of infrastructure. It is kind of the way we built our middle-class economy here in the U.S. We had a very, very vibrant private sector that grew dramatically, that took advantage of our entrepreneurial spirit in this country, and the capital was available, but we also built a massive highway system. So we had a transportation system available to take advantage of it. We also had free public education for everybody. That is not the case in much of the developing world. Eventually, we also had a decent healthcare system. We had those basic building blocks that allowed society to prosper and build with the private sector. You need to do both, and we need to have all of those different players working together, I believe, to make that happen. And I am very, very confident that we can do this. And I'm also confident that this will become an important issue in this country, that foreign aid will matter. And that is a great challenge in Congress, because typically constituents in my district and most districts, this isn't the first thing they think about when they get out of bed in the morning. They are not worried about global development. They are worried about their own health care. They're worried about their jobs, particularly these days. They're worried about the cost of gas and a whole bunch of other issues. How do you make development an important issue? And this is what I will close on because I have a hearing I have to get to. But I came at this issue in an interesting way. First of all, business got me interested in it. Bill Clapp, who used to be with Weyerhaeuser and Alaska Airlines, about 14 years ago became a philanthropist, got involved in microcredit in Central America, took me down to Honduras, showed me some of the stuff he was doing, and really got me interested in global poverty and why it was important for business. But also I'm on the Armed Services Committee. I chair the Terrorism Subcommittee. It's my committee that I have to get to. That's why I have to be there. Ordinarily, we have an out on those things, but when you're actually running it, it's really important to be there when it starts. So I was interested in counterterrorism. How do we fight the insurgencies that are cropping up all over the world? A lot of different answers to that question, but one of the biggest ones is development. If we are interested in security in this country, in a stable world, which we are interested in, we are still the most prosperous, most successful country in the history of the world. We benefit more from stable worldwide economic growth than any country in the world. And you simply aren't going to achieve that if development is not spread out more widely and more fairly so that more people are included in it, so that more people feel like they have a stake in what we all feel like we have a stake in, that it matters if their community, their society, their country is stable because they can prosper if it is. They are not going to be left behind. They are going to have opportunities to buy cell phones, to start their own businesses, to send their children to school, get them educated so that they can live better than their parents did. If all of those things become more widely out there in the world, then we have a more stable world. And the security concerns that we have, the concerns that we're seeing in Pakistan and Afghanistan, across much of Africa, certainly in the Middle East, become far, far less of a problem. And we will get to the point where we can spend a lot less on defense. For any defense contractors in the room, I apologize for that comment. But it would actually help us spend more money elsewhere that I think would help economic development. So what you are working on and what you are talking about today, I think, is the most important issue facing the globe in the next 50 years. How do we begin to develop those parts of the world that have currently been left behind by globalization?